Okay, so I'm going to try something a bit different here today because I didn't prepare. So instead of having slides, I'm just going to talk. I have some notes at least, but I'm not going to show you any slides, so you'll have to look at me instead. Or at the lovely invitation that's up on the screen to the October Hack event that we are inviting you all to. There's more info on the URL that the QR code leads to. All right, fair enough. What was I supposed to talk about? Well, the title of the talk was Why You Don't Need a Red Team Test. And while we at WithSecure pride ourselves on being a European market leader in those kinds of scenario-based red team tests, we quite often have discussions with clients where we quickly understand that the value that they would get out of such a test might not be in comparison with what they could get spending that money in other ways. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here today. So quickly, I'm going to go through 4 different scenarios that we've come across and try to explain to you why that scenario might not be a good reason to do a full-scale scenario-based red team test. So the first is that we encounter a organization that may know that they have internal problems with IT security. They might have weak security practices, but what they think that they need is to get more support from the leadership in the company. Sometimes we hear stuff like, we just want to scare the C-level. We want them to understand that, you know, this is serious stuff and we need more budget or whatever. And while this may be, and this is kind of the hardest one for me to tackle, while this may be a good idea in some cases, you're spending quite a lot of money for something with a very uncertain outcome. You don't know if that thing that you present to the board will actually make a really big difference. And at the same time, you may have spent a lot of money that doesn't go directly into improving the situation. So what I would perhaps propose in those situations is that you look at doing something a bit more tightly scoped. Maybe start with the insider scenario. If you're a big enough organization, you'll have some kind of understanding from leadership that, you know, there could be an insider who wants to do something bad and work from there and kind of move from a compromised workstation to one important target. And then that kind of compressed scope would give you the same kind of visibility into IT security problems as a communication aid, but for a significantly reduced budget. The other thing that we often hear is that we just want you to hack us and tell us how you hacked us so we can fix all the problems. And that kind of goes to a fundamental misunderstanding of what a scenario-based red team actually is and what it can do for you. So if what you really want to do is get a better understanding of what the vulnerabilities may be in your environment and what attack paths there are from A to B, then there are significantly cheaper options than doing a scenario-based red team full-scale, end-to-end cyber exercise, such as working together with the IT organization in like a white box. I really don't like that term, but I don't have an alternative. Type of engagement where your consulting partner would kind of through interviews and workshops with the IT department get a quickly get an understanding of the scope of the situation and then try out many more attack paths than you would be able to do within a scenario-based red team test, so that you get better coverage and broader results instead of just getting, okay, we hacked you this one way. Because that doesn't give you enough information to understand what other things may be in the environment that also would provide an attacker a means to get to their goal. The other thing that we often hear is that we want to confirm our detection capabilities. We've invested lots of money in this SOC function, or we've contracted with a security solution provider, service provider that does detection for us. And we just want to know that, you know, will they catch you when you try to hack us? When it comes to validating detection capabilities, there are much more efficient ways to do that as well. And again, working together with the people who are working on the blue team on the defending side actually gives them more value and gives them more opportunities to learn and improve than if they are totally unaware that there's an exercise going on and you're just hoping that they will catch something or that they will get good feedback after the exercise that will allow them to improve. I actually heard some really horrible stories about that kind of thing happening and the blue team just getting, a report 18 months later telling them that something happened 18 months ago and you need to do better next time, which isn't really helpful. The other thing that we hear sometimes is, well, it has to be a real attack. You have to do an attack like a real attacker would do with the same methods, and it has to be kind of an end-to-end scenario. And while there may be some merit to that, it also is something that can't be fetishized to the point of it being contrary to the objectives of the exercise. So what we often see is that there are limitations to what you can do in a consultant engagement like a scenario-based red team exercise. For example, there's always a time limit. We can't spend half a year waiting for somebody to click on a phishing link. There has to be another way of doing it. We can't perhaps use a real exploit against your VPN box because we can't wait until the next vulnerability comes along and we don't have time and money to spend on kind of researching zero-day vulnerabilities so we can use the same methods that an attacker would. There are much better ways of doing something that gives a realistic scenario, but skipping these limitations in an intelligent way. So for example, when it comes to making use of exploits to gain access through an internet-exposed VPN server, we could easily kind of play out that scenario by saying, well, what would an attacker gain? If next year your Pulse VPN box is vulnerable again, what would an attacker gain if they exploited that? Well, they would gain access to this network here. Okay, so give us access to that network through another host, and then we'll move from there as if it was a zero-day attack. So the kind of solution here that I'm trying to get to is that there are many different steps in an end-to-end scenario-based red team test that can actually be exercised in isolation. If you're more focused on getting better detection, then maybe focusing on detection and validating the data sources and analysis you have of those data sources might give you better results in terms of more improvement for the amount of time and money you invested into it. So I said that we pride ourselves on being market leaders in this segment. Why am I saying you shouldn't buy a red team test from us? Well, what I'm saying is that there are other things that might give you value, but there's other things that a red team test can do that you won't get from those types of more collaborative purple team exercises. The question that a red team test, scenario-based red team test, actually can help you answer that many of these other ideas that I talked about really can't help you with is the response and eradication part of the process. There's an unhealthy obsession with detection in the industry right now, I think. Whereas what really matters is, can you evict an attacker, a determined attacker, from your environment before they reach their goal, before you get ransomware, before your IP gets stolen, whatever it might be that their goal is. And that is something that a red team test can help you answer, because what it does is it gives you a scenario-based test of your organization as a whole. Not just detection, not just the prevention aspects, not just your response, but everything together, and gives you an opportunity to understand where people aren't working well together, where processes aren't in place to help that kind of flow work smoothly. And that's something where a red team test actually can provide a lot of value. But talk to your provider. Don't just ask for a red team test and insist on scenario-based red team testing. If what you really want is to improve your security posture, then have a discussion about what you might be able to do before you go to the full-scale scenario-based red team test. That was all I had to say. If you don't agree with what I said, please come see me afterwards. I'd love to hear your perspectives on this. If you do agree, buy me a beer. Feel free to talk to me afterwards, and thank you very much for listening.